Hello, I'm Bill, and this is the Warrior Medic. In episode 1, we named the wounds. And in episode 2, we traced those wounds to their source. And if you've been watching the daily shorts, you've been going deeper into each one. But today, we're going to move on to something different, something more immediate. Today, we're going to talk about what that wound is costing you right now, not 30 years ago, today. I want you to think about a man, and it might be you or it might be somebody you know. He gets up every morning and he does what needs to be done. He goes to work, he pays the bills, he tries to be a husband and a father, and by most external measures, he's holding it together. But look closer. His wife stopped trying to reach him emotionally years ago. Not because she stopped loving him, but because every time she reached out, he shut down. And eventually, she stopped reaching out. That marriage is functional. It's not alive, just functional. And his children, they're growing up in a house where dad is present, but he's somewhere else. They've learned not to bring him the hard things, not because he's cruel, but because he doesn't know what to do with hard things. So they carry those things alone. And they're learning. They're learning the way every child learns, by watching dad. And at work he's competent, he delivers. But he can't take feedback without landing as an attack. And he can't work under authority without something in him fighting back. He's burned through relationships and opportunities that should have gone differently, and he can't fully explain why they didn't. In his own inner life, when the noise stops, when the distractions run out, when it's 3 in the morning and he can't sleep, there's a persistent, quiet voice that tells him something is fundamentally wrong. Not with the circumstances, with him. He's never named that voice. He's never traced it. He just managed it with work, with achievement, with distance, with whatever keeps it quiet long enough to get through the day. Understand this. That man is paying a tax. He's paying a tax every single day on a wound he's never addressed. And let's talk about specific costs, because there are real and measurable costs. In his marriage, the wound costs a man intimacy, not physical intimacy, the deeper kind, the kind where a person actually knows what's happening on the inside of your life, and you know what's going on in theirs. A man with an unhealed wound cannot fully give that, because genuine intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires safety. And that safety was taken from him by a father or a home or an experience long before he ever got into the marriage. So he does what wounded men do. He provides. He shows up physically. He does the things a husband is supposed to do, but he stays behind that wall. And his wife knows it. And if neither of them has words for it, they bear it quietly. I know this cause personally. There were many years in my marriage where I was present in every way that could be measured and completely unreachable in the way that mattered. My wife was patient beyond what I deserved, but the cost was real, and it was paid by both of us. And in fathering, the wound costs a man presence, not the physical kind, the emotional kind. A wounded man can't give his children what he never received. He can provide for them. He can show up at games and events, and he can say the right things. But no one ever gave him emotional presence, genuine, engaged, I see you presence. And he doesn't have it to give. and his children feel that absence. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it, and they draw the same conclusion that every wounded boy has always drawn. Something must be wrong with me, otherwise, Dad would be there. That conclusion, installed in a child by an emotionally absent father, is the beginning of the next generation's wounds. Wounded fathers raise wounded sons. We said that in episode 2. This is what it looks like in practice. And at work, that wound costs a man his ceiling. A man who cannot receive authority, who can't take feedback without it landing as an attack, who cannot stay in a role long enough to build something because something always happens with the boss, a colleague, or when someone just pushes too hard. That man is talented. He may even be exceptional, but his wounds keep him from building on his talent because every workplace eventually requires what the wound makes impossible. It requires trust, submission to legitimate authority, vulnerability with colleagues, and the ability to receive correction without it triggering the old responses. I've watched many men torpedo their careers, their partnerships, and opportunities that should have been theirs, not because they lacked ability, but because they couldn't get out of their own way. The wound is running the show, and nobody has ever told them. And what about your faith? And I want to speak carefully here because this applies whether you have a faith background or not. The wound costs a man access to the one relationship that was designed to heal it. A man who grew up with a dangerous, absent, or withholding father does not have a category for a father who is safe, who is present, who sees him and stays. A father who grieves what was done to him and is not the source of the damage. So when he hears about God, he projects. He takes everything his earthly father was and assigns it to God. And then he either runs from that God, or he performs for that God, or worse yet, he simply dismisses the whole thing as irrelevant. And none of those responses are actually about God. They're about the father wound, wearing the face of theology. We'll come back to this in depth because it may wind up being the most important conversation this podcast ever has. But I want to plant the seeds now. The wound doesn't just cost you your marriage and your career and your relationship with your kids. It costs you access to the only one who has ever actually healed this particular damage in a man's soul. And then there's the cost to yourself, the cost that no one talks about and is paid entirely privately. The man who has never been allowed to grieve what was taken from him, the boy who grew up too fast because he had to and never got to finish being a boy, the years spent managing a wound instead of healing it, the energy consumed by performing, by keeping the wall up, by staying one step ahead of the voice that says it's not enough. That's an enormous cost, paid daily, in the currency of peace, joy, and the simple ability to be present in your own life. I paid that cost for decades. I was competent at almost everything I turned my hand to, and I was genuinely happy almost never. Not because my life was bad, because I was paying a tax I didn't know I owed on a wound I didn't know I had. So here's the question I want to leave you with today. How long are you willing to keep paying? Not how long can you keep paying? You can probably keep paying indefinitely. Wounded men are remarkably durable. They figure out how to function. They build lives around the damage. But durable is not the same as healed, and functional is not the same as free. How long are you willing to let the wound cost your wife the husband she deserves, your children the father they need, or your work the ceiling it could reach? Or how long are you willing to allow it to cost you the peace that is supposed to be yours? At some point, and I believe that point is now for the man who has watched this far, the cost becomes unacceptable. That moment, when a man decides the cost is too high, is the beginning of something. So here's your one thing for this week. Pick one area: marriage, fathering, faith, your own inner life, whatever, and write it down honestly. What has the wound cost you here? Not what happened to you. What has the cost the people around you and yourself paid because of what happened to you? Don't share it yet. Just see it clearly, because a man who can see the cost clearly is a man who is ready to stop paying it. Come back next week, because we're going to start talking about why willpower alone has never fixed this problem and what actually does. If something stirred you today, if you recognize the cost in your own life, my book, Forged by Fire, is in the show notes below. It's the full account of what this cost me and what it took to stop paying it. The link is there. My name is Bill, and this is the Warrior Medic. No man left behind.